Welcome. I'm glad that you all can join us today. I'm an advocate and trainer for over 20 years at Starbridge and work in the 15-county area under various grants. Over the years, I've had many calls from families wanting to know why their child can't be in the regular education classroom with supports, or calls asking why their child has to be in the regular education classroom when they don't want them there. Today, we will go over how it is decided what classroom a child will go into and why. I will be discussing the New York State Special Education Curriculum, Special Education Continuum of Special Education Services. This is the range of possible special education services for children with disabilities that have been classified through the CSE process. I appreciate through the polling questions to know that we have a great audience with a lot of family members and a lot of professionals. This webinar is kind of geared like I'm talking to families, but I'm also talking to professionals because I know you will be the ones that will go on and share this information with families. So I'm very grateful for you being here so that more and more families can understand how to be equal members in the whole process. Okay, we're going to figure out what, oh, there, sorry. Couldn't figure out why I couldn't advance the slide. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? We're going to increase knowledge of least restrictive environment, or LRE. We're going to increase understanding on how the location of special education services is determined, increase knowledge of the New York State Continuum of Special Education Services, and increase understanding of how to be an equal member in the CSE process. So where do we start on deciding appropriate special education services? We start with the needs of your child and the Committee on Special Education. It is where appropriate special education services will be determined for your child and then become a part of your child's individual education plan, or IEP. Since the CSE is responsible for determining appropriate special education services for all classified children with disabilities, and then determine the location those services will be delivered and the school placement of the child, where do they start? What guidelines do they have to follow? The CSE must provide these special education services in accordance with the federal law known as IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That ensures every child is entitled to a free and appropriate public education with appropriate services and supports that are to be delivered in the least restrictive environment, or LRE. As we look at the Continuum of Special Education Services, it's important to understand what IDEA, or Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, says. So what does IDEA actually state about least restrictive environment when educating a child with disabilities? And I'm going to read this because I think it's really important for people to understand the exact wording in this. And so it says, IDEA states, to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities, including children in private or in public or private institutions or other care facilities, are educated with children who are not disabled, and that special classes, separate schooling, or other removal of children with disabilities from the regular education environment occurs only when the nature or severity of the disability is such that education in regular classes with the use of supplementary aids and services cannot be achieved satisfactorily. The CSE is guided by the federal law IDEA, but also the New York State education law and its regulations. The state law has to follow the federal law and can add additional things if they want to, if it doesn't conflict with IDEA. The New York State regulations that go along with the state education law are called the Part 200s. And again, I want families especially to understand the wording in all of this. So when they go to their meetings, they will understand how to be an equal partner. So the New York State Special Education regulations actually say that least restrictive environment means that placement of students with disabilities in special classes, separate schools, or removal from the regular educational environment occurs only when the nature or severity of the disability is such that even with the use of supplementary aids and services, education cannot be satisfactorily achieved. The placement of individual student with a disability in the least restrictive environment shall, number 1, provide the special education needed by the student, and number 2, provide for education of the student to the maximum extent appropriate to the needs of the student with other students who do not have disabilities, and number 3, to be as close as possible to the student's home. The Part 200 also spells out the state's definition of LRE, and as you can see, it was similar to IDEA that I just read before, but also goes into more depth of the 3 stipulations at the bottom. So I encourage everyone to be very familiar with the wording on these. A New York State Education Department Field Advisory distributed in December of 2015, and it hasn't been updated since then, reinforced New York State's commitment to continue to increase opportunities for specially designed instruction and related services in the least restrictive environment for students with disabilities based again on IDEA. New York State was found to be behind other states in having children with disabilities educated in the least restrictive environment. Data was showing far too many children with disabilities were being removed from the general education classroom and placed in separate classrooms in schools. This memo to all school districts in the state reminded schools of their responsibilities to look at LRE first when deciding on placements for their students with disabilities. One part of this memo that I would like to look at with you is what the CSE responsibilities are each annual IEP CSE meeting. It says each school district must ensure that the Committee on Preschool Special Education and the Committee on Special Education, including parents, understand their responsibilities for LRE determinations, and that each annual review include considerations of special education services and supplementary supports and services that would support the student to receive education services in the student's regular school and in age-appropriate general education classrooms. Yeah, you will find this field advisory memo in the resource section in your handouts that for today. So IDEA supports that special education is not a place, it's a set of services and supports where a child with a disability receives special education services is the child's placement. The New York State Part 200 regulations and also the New York State Education Department's LRE field memo also supports this. Special education is a service, not a place. The New York State Continuum of Services can be found in the Part 200 regulations in Section 200.6. As you look at the Continuum of Services triangle, you will see that the least restrictive environment, or LRE, is at the bottom. The bottom of the triangle, which is the largest part, represents where the majority of all children in school are educated, and that is the regular education classroom. As you go up the triangle, it gets smaller, and each line represents a more restrictive environment for classified children to be educated in, because each step has fewer, if any, regular education students in it. The CSE must decide first if a classified student's needs can be met in the regular education classroom before considering a more restrictive environment. Remember, you are an equal member of the CSE, and your input is important in this decision-making process. So, when making the decision on the appropriate special education services, location, and placement that are needed to meet the child's needs, the child's IEP should be looked at closely. First, any evaluations that may have been done on the child should be looked at. These show the child's strengths and needs. Next, the child's present levels of performance, or PLEPs, should be looked at carefully. It is in the PLEPs that describe a child's current strengths and needs. These should be well defined based on the information gathered from evaluations throughout the school year. The PLEPs look at academics, which include all subject areas and function levels, interests and preferences, instructional supports and services, accommodations and modifications that have been used. PLEPs describes what has worked and what hasn't worked. It looks at social needs of the child and how they get along with others, and both peers and adults. What are their strengths? What are their needs? Are they the leaders, or are they the followers in their classrooms? Are their behaviors appropriate? Present levels of performance look at physical needs, the child's motor and sensory development, and how they relate to learning. The present levels of performance look at the management needs of a student. Does the child need any certain material resources, braille, large print, colored paper, a computer, environmental modifications such as an FM system, fewer pictures on the wall, certain lighting, or does the child need human resources like a person to help transition a child from one location to another, to help with a behavior plan, or to keep the child on task? Be sure as a parent, and professionals encourage parents, that the child's present levels performance describe your child well, because your child's special education program will be determined by what they say. The present levels performance drive the services your child will receive. They can't be stressed enough how important it is that they're written well. So I encourage you all to look at your child's IEP and see if it's describing your child well. Next, we would look at the goals and objectives that are based on the needs stated in the present levels of performance to see what type of environment they could be met in. They could possibly be met in many environments with appropriate supports. Goals can be covered in lots of areas. Then look at the special education supports and services that the child needs that are described also in the present levels of performance in order for the child to progress on their goals. And then LRE determines what constitutes an appropriate program for the child, not what pre-existing program fits best. That's really important to remember. It's not what program they can fit into, it's what the need of the child is. Consider if the student can progress on their IEP goals in the regular education classroom. That would be the first thing that would be looked at. They would process by examining the regular education classroom as the first option, as required by IDEA, as we read earlier when we were reading the definitions. There should be an in-depth discussion on whether the student can be educated satisfactorily to meet their needs and progress on their IEP goals in the regular education classroom with one or more of the following. Supplementary aids and supports. IDEA and Part 200 regulations do not provide an extensive list of what that could be. It just says what supports does a child need to be successful in LRE. And so the following are some ideas of types of supports that could be really helpful for the child to be successful. So let's look at things like accommodations. What might that look like in the regular education classroom? It might be supports to environmental needs like certain seating, planned seating on a bus even, in the classroom, at lunch, in the auditorium or other locations. It could be anything from the size, what the pictures on the walls, anything that might be environmentally affect a child. So can those things be arranged? Pacing of instruction needed. Does there need to be more break time? Do more materials need to be sent home? Presentation of the subject matter. Can it be in taped lectures? Can it be with paired reading or writing? What kinds of supports need to happen for the child? Assignment modifications. Do they need shorter assignments, taped lessons, instructions broken down into steps? Self-management. Do they need things like calendars, picture schedules? Do they need to learn study skills? Do they need certain testing adaptations that would work all right in the regular education classroom? Social interaction support needed. Do they need circles of friends to develop for them? Do they need cooperative learning groups? Do they need to be taught social skills? Sometimes this is where it's said that a child is not going to be successful in a special education classroom because they are often put in there without the supports of the social interaction support. So that's something to really be thinking about. Do they need a circle of friends or cooperative learning groups? Consultant teacher and other staff support, a one-on-one assistant, that certainly can be a part of a supplementary supports and services. Behavioral specialists, possibly even a healthcare assistant if there are health needs. Is there planning time needed for collaboration by the staff? Has that been figured into the equation. Assistive technology, would that help the child to be in the regular education classroom with a computer, specialized software, note taker, and electronic note taker, FM system, just augmentative communication device, any type of assistive technology? It might be helpful from something very small to something very big. Does a child need a functional behavioral assessment done and a behavior intervention plan developed in order to benefit from the least restrictive environment? Does the staff need training in the development and implementation of the functional behavioral assessment or the behavior intervention plan that was developed from the functional behavioral assessment to meet the behavioral challenges that may be presented by a student in the regular education classroom? Do they need training on any assistive technology devices that the child may be using? And et cetera, and et cetera. You can think of all the staff training that may be necessary. And then, again, what else might be needed? Supplementary supports and services can be endless. It can challenge the CSE to think outside of the box and with all of this. There are many ideas to consider, and many should be considered because just a few common ones are not enough to be considered. During the LAR decision-making process, it's important to remember that IDEA states that a child with a disability is not removed from the education in age-appropriate regular education classrooms solely because of needed modifications in the general education curriculum. So what other goals might there be other than academic that a child could benefit for being in the least restrictive environment? So the needs and goals should be looked at closely to see what environment can they be achieved in and why. Some children's needs and goals can be achieved in least restrictive environment because of the role modeling of typically developing peers and the enriched regular education environment. So some children may have needs and goals similar to the following that could possibly be met in the least restrictive environment. Goals around things like student will participate appropriately with other students their age. They'd have appropriate age role models. Students need to become more aware of their environment. Other goals might be learn to take turns with their peers. Increase vocabulary. Practicing to remember, listen, and share ideas. Comprehension. Increase task commitment. Learn to follow directions. Increase receptive and expressive language. Many goals on a child's IEP can be accomplished in a variety of settings with different environments that can be very stimulating to the child to want to try to do their goals, like, certainly learn to follow directions if all the other children are doing that. And certainly language, and increase receptive and expressive language. My child is a preschooler, had very limited speech, and he was placed in a classroom with children that did not have speech difficulties, and it was amazing to me within a few months the number of words and things that he picked up from just being in that kind of environment because he hadn't been in that type of educational environment before. So those are all things to consider. Can your child's IEP goals be accomplished in a variety of settings? And also giving them opportunity to build peer relationships. The next discussion to have in the LRE decision-making process with the CSE is to compare the benefits in the regular education classroom and those provided in a special education classroom or segregated setting in the following areas: academics, communication skills, peer role modeling, and social. Compare social and communication skills benefit in both settings, as well as the academic benefits amongst the peers the students would be interacting with. And I kind of gave you the example of my particular situation with my child when he was young. The key is to compare the relative benefits for the student in each setting that will enable them to progress on their IEP goals Keep in mind that the regular education classroom placement is not dependent on the student's ability to learn the same things in the same way as unclassified students. That's what the IEP is for, to meet the needs of what they need to have additional. The last discussion to have in the LRE process is to consider the potentially beneficial or harmful effects that a regular class placement may have on the student with a disability. IDEA regulations provide that in selecting the least restrictive environment, consideration is given to any potential harmful effect on the student or on the quality of services that the student needs. Consider each of these three factors equally: management needs, pace of the curriculum and how it might be modified, self-esteem of student in different settings. Some positive benefits might include a more enriching educational environment, social interactions with typical peers, peer role modeling, and higher expectations. Some harmful effects might include unduly disruptive behavior that impacts the student's learning or that of others, even with the implementation of a behavior intervention plan. The student not liking their work modified if it is needed, or having accommodations that make them feel different from their classroom peers. I've had many cases that I've dealt with the positive effects, and then also some that have dealt with the harmful effects, that the child just doesn't want to be in the regular education classroom. So it's really important to look at these and look at each child individually and not group the children into what you think they would be, but to actually look at each child individually on all of these. Well, the IED regulations permit consideration of the effect of the placement of a student with a disability in a regular education classroom on the other students in the classroom. Selected findings from federally funded research projects indicate how regular education students are affected by having a student with a disability in their regular education classroom. So how were they affected? So I have three different studies here. One, achievement test performance among students who were classmates of students with significant disabilities were equivalent or better than a comparison group. Students developed more positive attitudes toward peers with disabilities. Another study showed that self-concept, social skills, and problem-solving skills improved for all students in inclusive settings. These are studies that are over 20 or more years old. Nothing is any different now than it was then. Regular education students and special education students can benefit from being educated together with the appropriate supports and services that are needed. And that's the key. They have to have the appropriate supports and services to be successful. The ways that a student can be supported in a least restrictive environment in the continuum of special education services are the following. A consultant teacher is a service to help support a student in LRE, or least restrictive environment. A consultant special education teacher works in the regular education classroom with the child in the subject areas where the student needs special education support to be able to benefit from the regular education class instruction. The consultant teacher can work with a student for a minimum, and this is a part that's important to understand, is it's a minimum. There is no maximum, but the minimum of 120 minutes a week. The time is based on the child's needs. So if the child needs 200 minutes a week, there's nothing that says that they can't have that. The consultant teacher services can either be direct as working with the child individually or in a small group, or indirect as working with regular education teacher and other team members. Direct and indirect times it's put on the IEP together, and it would be listed there as how much time is how much time would be on a child's IEP. If you looked at it, you'd be able to see what type of consultant teacher services there are, and if they are both direct and indirect. Related services can also be provided to support the student in the LRE to be able to access the general education curriculum if the student qualifies for those services. So speech, interpreting services, orientation, mobility, assistive technology services, To name a few, are related services that could support a child in the LRE. Integrated teaching is out of the regular education classroom, but this option still allows for a child with disabilities to be educated with other children without disabilities. Districts do not have to provide an integrated co-teaching option, but most districts do now. This option is a classroom of students with disabilities and students without disabilities being co-taught by both a regular education teacher and a special education teacher. And there can be no more than 12 classified students with disabilities in that classroom. All of the other students must be unclassified regular education students. Students can spend their entire school day in this classroom or just be in there for certain subject areas that they need extra support in. So the assumption is that there will be at least 12 regular education students in there, but depending on what this, that's the assumption, that it will be at least half of them will be. And it could be more based on what each school district has for the size of their classrooms. If a student's needs cannot be met in the regular education classroom or the itinerant, the integrated co-teaching classroom, the child might be placed in a classroom that is made up entirely of other children that are classified or a special class. These children must be grouped with similar needs. Similar needs in academics, social, physical, and management. Similarity in academics would include levels of knowledge and development in subject and skill areas, including activities of daily living, level of intellectual functioning, adaptive behavior, expected rate of progress in acquiring skills and information, and learning styles. It is important to know that the range of academic or educational achievement shall be limited to assure instruction provided opportunities to achieve their annual goals. The CSE will consider this the most important thing in grouping, but they must also consider the other three areas in making a location and placement decision. Academics is looked at first and foremost, with the others supporting it. So the others that support it with social development must also be considered, and this would include the degree and quality of the students' relationships with peers and adults, feelings about self, and social adjustment to school and community environments. So much thought must be given to how does a student interact with others? What is the maturity level of social development? One thing to remember is that social needs of a student cannot be the sole determinant of a placement, but it does add to the overall picture of the needs of what the needs of the student are. Physical development must be considered and would include the degree or quality of the student's motor and sensory development, health, vitality, and physical skills and limitations which pertain to the learning process. Opportunities to benefit from instruction and access to it. Development can vary, but consideration needs to be given to the level of variation in development, and is it appropriate for your child? Again, always having your child foremost in your mind when considering all of these things. Last, the management needs of a student need to be looked at closely, like the nature of and degree to which environmental modifications and human or material resources are required to enable the student to benefit from instruction. Things like appropriate supports needed by each student in that classroom. One student's needs does not consistently detract from the learning opportunities of other students in the classroom. And management needs may vary in the classroom, but consider if this variation is appropriate for your child to be able to progress on their IEP goals. Classified students must also be grouped with other students within 36 months of their birthdays. The exceptions are if a school gets a variance from the state education department to go beyond the 36 months of age. Or if the student is 16 years or older, then the student could possibly be grouped from ages of 16 to 21 years of old. Or if a student is placed in a classroom with up to 12 students with one teacher, one aide for every 3 students, and is called a 12 to 1 to 3 classroom. Then those students can range in ages from 5 years old to 21 years old. This program is for students with severe multiple disabilities. Always be sure to ask the age range at any placement being considered for your child. So, IDEA states that there should be a continuum of services for classified students with a disability to meet any of their special education needs. So as we continue to look at the continuum of services, you can see we're going up the triangle, and each step is considered more restrictive because now students are grouped with similar needs separately with other students with disabilities in a separate special class, and with fewer and fewer students in each class as we go up the continuum. So let's look at the first one. Resource Room is a special education program for a student in either a special class or a general education who needs specialized supplementary instruction for a portion of the day that supports their classroom instruction. Resource Room is for 3 hours, is again for a minimum of 3 hours and no more than half of the school day. It can, for a week, 3 hours a week, or can be combined with consultant teacher services for a total of both services being given again for a minimum of 3 hours a week. In Resource Room, the child can be grouped in no more than 5 at a time, working with this Resource Room teacher, and also they would be grouped with similar needs. As we go up the triangle, the first class would be a 15-1-1, which means 15 students to 1 teacher. These classrooms are typically found in large school districts as a district classroom. They are for students that need specialized instruction, which can best be accomplished in a small, self-contained classroom. A 12-to-1 would have 12 students and 1 teacher. And if you go on to a 12-to-1 to 1, there would now be an aide in the classroom. An addition of an aide in the classroom would be based on the management needs of the student that are interfering with the instructional process. These classrooms are typically found in local school districts as district classrooms, or sometimes there may be a BOCES classroom that in a district that may be a 12-to-1-1. Now we're going up the continuum. We're becoming more restrictive, fewer students. An 8-1-1 would be 8 students, 1 teacher, and 1 aide. This special class would be made up of students whose management needs are determined to be intensive and require a significant degree of individualized attention and intervention. These classrooms are typically found in local schools and are either district-based classrooms, or they could be a BOCES classroom that is in that district too. A 6-1-1 would be 6 students, 1 teacher, and 1 aide. This special class would be made up of students whose management needs are considered highly intensive and require a high degree of individualized attention and intervention. These classrooms are typically found again in local school districts as district classrooms, or there may be a BOCES classroom there in the district. A 12-to-1-to-3 would consist of 12 students, 1 teacher, and 1 aide for every 3 students. This special class is made up of students with severe multiple disabilities ranging in ages from 5 years old to 21 years old. The students' program consists primarily of habilitation and treatment in this classroom. As we go up, we're becoming more restrictive, and private schools are considered very restrictive because these schools are only for students with disabilities in a segregated setting. There are no opportunities to be around children without disabilities. These classrooms are typically 8-1-1s or 6-1-1s. Residential is considered even more restrictive because the student would be living away from home now at a school that is only for students who have a disability. And the most restrictive is considered home and hospital, the most restricted placement. In this placement, the student is not able to interact with any other students with disabilities or without disabilities. They're home by themselves. In your handouts, you have a PACER article to help you better understand IDEA and least restrictive environment. So things to consider as decisions are being made for your child's special education services and the location and placement that they will be provided in. Your input is necessary and is very important for this decision. So let's think about what school districts can't make placement decisions based solely on. These are things that they can't make the decisions based solely on. So the first one is category of disability. For example, if your child has autism and they do not have to be placed in a classroom specifically designed for children with autism. This happens often and is very appropriate for some, but not for all. Placement is decided on similarity of needs, and needs can vary greatly within a type of a disability. So that's one thing to keep in mind. They can't place solely on category of disability. Severity of disability. For example, all children with severe disabilities are not placed in a 12 to 1 to 3. This placement might not meet the needs of a child with severe disabilities in all areas: academic, social, physical, and management. And the age range from 5 to 21 allowed in that setting may be too large of an age span for an appropriate education to be able to meet your child's IEP goals. Some families do not understand that their children are placed in a 12-1-3 classroom, or understand what those classrooms are just made up for. And I quite often get calls about that, so please always make sure that you understand the placement that your child is going into. Availability of educational or related services. For example, if your child is recommended to have occupational therapy 3 times a week, but the occupational therapist is available only 2 times a week, the school district should have to then contract with another occupational therapist to provide the recommended level of service, not reduce your child's level of services because they can't provide it. If they cannot find the service providers, they need to be showing that they are actively trying to find them, but through advertising and contacting. They need to have a written log of how they are trying to find the different therapists that the school district may not be able to have at the time. Under IDEA, lack of adequate personnel or resources does not relieve school districts of their obligations to make FAPE, or free appropriate public education, available to each disabled student in the least restrictive educational setting in which their IEP can be implemented. So IDEA says you have to try to find the people as best you can. Availability of space or administrative convenience. The identified child's needs are what is important, not the school district needs. The Continuum of Services allows for creative ways to meet a student's needs through a variety of locations or combinations of locations, such as consultant teacher for part of the time, or possibly resource or integrated co-teaching. The child can be in different settings throughout the day if that is what would meet their needs. The location and placement are 2 separate things listed in 2 different places in the IEP. Location in the IEP refers to the type of environment that is appropriate where a child's special education services can be given. An example would be consultant teacher services given in the general education classroom for English, specialized reading instruction given in a special education classroom, or speech therapy given in the therapy room. The location of all special education services should be clearly written on the IEP, so you will know where your child's services are being delivered. I had a call one time from a family who said, yes, my child is in the least restricted environment with the consultant teacher. And I said, okay, when is that happening or where? and come to find out the child had always been pulled out into a small special class each day that the parents thought that the child was in the regular classroom. So again, just be aware of what's happening, see what's written on your IEP, make sure you scrutinize your IEP well so that you understand where your child is. The placement specifies where the student's IEP will be implemented. That's what the placement is. So will it be in a setting such as a public school? Is a placement a public school, a BOCES classroom, private school, etc.? Children with disabilities have a right to be with typical peers as much as possible. If your child is placed in a self-contained special education classroom, they should be there only for the areas they need and that they need the support in. If your child is good in science, then they should have the opportunity to be mainstreamed into a regular education science classroom with the supports they need to be successful. A child in a self-contained special education classroom may have interests outside of academics in art or in music. They have a right to attend those classes with typical peers with the supports they need to be successful. A self-contained classroom is listed on the IEP with the time and subjects the child will be there. And this is based on the child's needs as stated in the IEP present levels of performance. I talk a lot about present levels of performance. I can't emphasize enough how important it is how well those are written for your child. But just keep in mind that children have a right to be with typical peers as much as possible. So look for that in your child's day and when can that happen for them? And when it happens for them, do they have the appropriate support so that they will be successful there? Children with disabilities have a right to have access to extracurricular activities. That's very important to know. The IDEA supports that, and also the New York State education law and regulations, that if a child wants to be in extracurricular activities, then the support needs to be going there for them. The only place that a child would not be able to participate in extracurricular activities if there are cuts, such like sport. And if that is the case, then the child would need to be able to compete at the same level as the other students that are competing for those slots in the sports teams. Otherwise, whatever activities, extracurricular activities are offered for all children in the school district, a child with disabilities has that same right to be a part of that. And the CSE looks carefully at that to see, okay, what kind of level of support is that child needing during the regular school day? Will they also need that level of support in extracurricular activities? So if they need to aid in the day, then do they need to aid in drama club? And those things would be provided through that. My son wanted to play sports because of his motor skills. He was not able to compete competitively in regards to trying out for the team. So we looked at it at a sport where there were no cuts, and there were no cuts in track. So he was able to participate in track, and he needed a one-to-one aid through the school day. So he had a one-to-one aid with his extracurricular activities. So families, please look closely at that, and professionals, please encourage your families you're working with for them to look at that. It helps round out a child's school experience to be a part of the extracurricular activities that all other children in the school district are involved with. Be sure to visit all classroom recommendations made for your child. Don't ever agree to a location and placement without looking at it first. Be prepared with questions and look at the pros and the cons of each classroom you visit. You have a right to know the profiles of the other students that are in the different classrooms, so to be sure that your child would be placed there with other children, again, with similar needs. The similar needs is what they have to be placed with. You do not have a right to know their names, obviously, but you do have a right to know a profile of the type of students your child is going to be with, so you can help determine if they are similar needs, because again, you are a member of the CSE committee. In the handout, there's a parent's worksheet for you to review before making classroom visits, so you will be prepared to get the information you need to make a good decision for your child. So it's a handout of things just to think about, so that when you go to look at a classroom, you come away with concrete examples of what looked really good for your child there that would be appropriate for your child. And then you would have concrete examples of what is not appropriate for your child. You always need examples of the pros and cons when you're visiting a classroom. Understanding the Continuum of Special Education Services helps you to better be prepared to work with your CSE committee to provide your child with the appropriate special education services to meet his needs in the right location and placement. It is always important to remember that your child's IEP is an individualized education program designed to meet what your child's needs are, and that the program is appropriate to meet those needs of your child. Then you will know your child is getting a free and appropriate public education, or FAPE, if the program is meeting your needs and your child is progressing and advancing in that program. Knowing your resources will help you to be a more informed member of the CSE, and I encourage you to look at a lot of things. And here are just a few online resources that will help. The first link is the New York State Educational website, and you can see it's nysed.gov. I encourage you to get familiar with that. This link will direct you to information on the Continuum of Special Education Services for school-age children with disabilities, and it's in a question and answer format, and it will be the type of information we've gone over today. The next link is to again, back to the New York State Educational website, to the Part 200 regulations. Be familiar with them and understand how they're applying to your child's educational program, their whole IEP, and what your rights are and your due process rights. Just become familiar with that and being able to search through those. Section 200.6, you can see I put over there kind of at the end there. I just wanted to let you know where you can find the Continuum of Services that we've discussed today. The next one down there is Rights Law. It's a great website for anyone, and I would encourage families to definitely look at that. It's written by lawyers, and it gives topics and opinions on all kinds of things related to anything to do with special education. So there's a lot of information there on least restrictive environment and IDEA and all of those types of things. And the next one is understood.org. It's a great resource. It talks about a wide variety of things related to disabilities and special education. Kidstogether.org is a site it talks about the benefits of children being not segregated away from each other, but to have children with disabilities and children without disabilities being educated together. And that's a great website to look at. And then our Starbridge website, please go there. We have a lot of resources on these topics too. And along our bar on the top, there's a resource button to push, and it will show all the different resources that we have. So again, it's just really important as a family to have as much information as you possibly can have to advocate for your child. So how would you be prepared now when you're going to go to your meeting to discuss placement options for your child next year? So the best thing you can do is to be prepared when you attend your child's CSE meeting by learning as much as you can about your child's rights and having as much information as possible about how your child's year has gone so far. Some things to review before you attend the meeting are things like the IEPs. We're getting prepared. We're putting things in our backpack for preparation. So look at your child's IEPs and the draft IEP that you should be getting ahead of time. So make sure you ask for that draft. And look and see what is different in the IEPs between the two, the current one and the one they're proposing, and highlight what the differences are and what is the same in both of those. And use different colored highlighters so that you can see the difference when you just quickly glance through them. So I encourage people to mark up their IEPs a lot with different colors. So you want to know the progress on the IEP goals, so get your progress reports out for the year. This will help determine whether your child had appropriate supports and services in their current setting. That will help make a big difference on whether they need a different setting or not. Report cards, you want to know, you want to review your child's report cards. Do they show progress or lack of it in the classroom curriculum? You want to know how the child is doing in the curriculum for the grade that they're in. Any teacher's notes or emails that talk about how your child has been doing. Take samples of your child's schoolwork if that is appropriate. It can be very helpful at times to prove a point if a child is progressing or not. So I encourage families to keep examples of schoolwork that's coming home, especially like from year to year. Then you can kind of line those up with each other to kind of say, okay, I can see a nice progress happening, or no, there's not much progress happening here. So that's really good idea. And if your child has a daily notebook going back and forth, from school, review that and make copies of sections that might be helpful in deciding the appropriate level of special education services and placements. Any outside evaluations you or the school has done in counselor's notes, if your child has one, is good to review and look ahead of time. Be sure you understand the reports, and if you don't, make sure you ask ahead of time to have them explained to you. This is very important, so you'll have time to think about the information and time to have any questions answered that you may have. If you had an outside evaluation done and you want to share it with the CSE, be sure to give it to the CSE beforehand so everyone will be familiar with the evaluation and it can be discussed at the meeting. The last thing you want to put in here is a list of what you want to be sure to be covered. You want to have your list of questions and concerns written out so that when you come out of that meeting, you don't say, oh, I forgot to ask that, because you're going to have a list in front of you to check off as you go down through them. The better informed you are about your child, the better team member and advocate you will be for your child. Be sure to take all your information you have gathered and organize it. This way you'll be able to quickly access information if you need to. Your backpack is organized and full, and you can feel assured you have done your best at being the best advocate for your child. It is close to 1 o'clock, but I did kind of want to do a polling question, ask what else you put in your backpack. So those of you that can hang on a little bit longer, go ahead and quickly put those things in there for Laura, and we'll read them quickly.
Okay, if you want to just take a moment and put something that you like to put in your backpack as you go out to your CSE meeting, I want you to go ahead and do that right now, and then I will be able to share that information, which will be helpful. A person wrote, I like to bring my son's binders with all of his records in it. Love that.
You have everything you need right there. That's an excellent idea. And a picture of your child in the front too, I bet. So that makes it even better.
Here's a great one. My child.
Yes, for sure. Yes.
Someone else wrote, I bring a picture of my child.
Very good, very good. That helps keep you very centered as well as the child being there. Yes.
Someone else put, I like to bring a friend, so I feel comfortable.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. More ears, and they can also take notes for you too. That's a very good idea.
And the last one is I bring any information that I feel comfortable with sharing from outside therapists.
Very good. Yes, that's excellent. So it sounds like you have a lot more things to add, into your backpack, and I just really encourage you just to be organized with the things you're bringing so that you can quickly research them and get them out quickly if the need arises. So thank you all.
Oh, we have one last one. It says, I am hard of hearing, so I bring a tape recorder.
That's a really good idea. Just let them know that you're taping, because they'll probably want to tape too, but that's a really good one to do. Okay, so what I want to leave you with here is life is like a puzzle. Stop trying to place people where they don't fit. So place your child where they will fit and then they will grow in all the areas that we've discussed. So I know now it is 1 o'clock, but if people would like to stay on and ask questions, I can certainly do that too. And you can too, Laura?
Oh, absolutely. And we actually have a couple of questions to kick us off, and feel free to go ahead and put your answers in. Great question, especially for this time of year. Oh, before you get started, I wanted to touch base on when Gretchen had talked about being able to, do participate in extracurricular activities at school. And for some students that may require one-to-one aid, I also wanted to share a really great program that we have at Starbridge. It's called TIES, and it stands for Together Including Every Student, so TIES. You can find it on our website. It will tell you if your school district has that program. I have experienced a lot of families. What they do is they get a peer, and I believe they're 8th grade and up, to we've seen a lot of peers participate in like track or maybe robotics or things like that, so that they don't have to have a quote unquote adult. They have a typical peer with them, supporting them through that as well. So that's also something that's really great to look into.
Thank you. Thanks for adding that. That is a great program. I know many schools and parents that use that program. It's a great one.
I have a question. I live in a very rural area. My child was approved for music therapy, but they can't find a therapist to deliver the service.
Sometimes if the person doesn't exist, the person doesn't exist, unfortunately. But the school district still has to prove that they are trying to find one. Have they contacted their local BOCES? Do they have an ad in the paper? Have they asked other school districts if they have one? They need to be actively always pursuing that.
Great, thank you. The next one is a great one for this time that we live in. Someone is scheduled for a virtual CSE meeting in the next few weeks, and they're going to talk about placement for their child who is in elementary school. How do they see the placement or understand the placement? What any suggestions going forward, especially in the current times that we have?
Right. I wouldn't advise anybody to ever place their child if they haven't observed it. I know that the concerns here might be, is the placements are going to fill up, but again, you don't know what it is like. Is there a possibility that they're willing to put you in touch with parents of other children in that placement if you feel you need to make this placement? Certainly they can do that by contacting the other parent. They won't give you the parent's name and number, but they can contact the other parent, getting permission for you to talk to them. That's one way to think about it. Certainly they need to be explaining it fully with all the questions that you have around that placement. But again, I really caution parents to ever make a placement decision without seeing the placement.
Great, thanks. The next question is, I feel my child needs support to stay in gen ed with a one-to-one aid, but the school says they have a better classroom placement, and it's in an all-day 12 to 1-to-1. So I think really the question is, and it looks like they're saying that the one-to-one aid in gen ed, they're saying, is a little too restrictive for the student. So, and I hope I'm capturing the question correctly. If you could elaborate on that.
It's that just sounds, I get so many calls about this, and it truly amazes me. We just went through the Continuum of Services, and you saw that there was nothing about one-to-one aid be considered more restrictive. That wasn't on the Continuum of Services, and looking at keeping your child in the least restrictive environment talks about supplementary aids and supports. Have they all been tried to be able to keep the child in the least restrictive environment? And one of those possibilities of a extra supplementary supports and services is a one-to-one aid. If they think that the one-to-one aid is too restrictive because they're all over the child, then that talks about training the aid to know what their role is and what they're supposed to be doing. And when a school, to determine whether there's a need for a one-to-one aid, you'd be looking at, there's a memo and guidance from state ed about how to determine if a child needs a one-to-one aid. And I encourage you to look at that. And that would be to go to the New York State Educational website, the one I mentioned before, nysed.gov, and look under special education publications, and that'll draw up a whole bunch of publications, and look under one-to-one aid and see what it says there about your child. But as far as, and I hear this argument all the time about a one-to-one being too restrictive, that I'm not sure who started that, but schools use it. A lot of schools use that argument. But I think you can argue around that fact. And again, you go back to IDEA that we read the definition of how a child's to determine if they're supposed to be taken out of a least restrictive environment, and the New York State regulations part 200s. That's your argument back on that for your child.
Great, thanks, Gretchen. The next one is, how do you go about getting your child qualified for a consultant teacher? Their child is struggling in the area of reading.
Go
ahead.
Is the child classified, I'm assuming?
It doesn't say, but let's say either way, whether they're classified or not. Maybe you could do one if they were classified and one if they were not.
If they were classified, then the IEP would state the level of service they needed, and then again you would look to see if that service could be delivered in the least restrictive environment, in the regular education classroom with the consultant teacher. So again, you kind of want to look at what the child's need is, what is the goal for the child, and can the child stay in the regular education classroom for that reading. Or do they need to be working with a reading teacher outside the classroom for a certain length of time of day, and then go back to the regular education classroom? Kind of again, based on the needs of your child if they're classified. If they're not classified and they're reading, I guess we would be looking at RTI, response to intervention, or we could be looking at school-based services for extra reading. I'm not sure if we've answered the question or not. If we haven't, please call our office and speak to our intake coordinator, and she'll hook you up with an advocate to discuss this further with you.
Great. And you can also at any time always, if they're still struggling, you don't see progress, you can always ask for updated testing in those areas, whether they're classified or not. See how they're doing, and they'll do some updated testing. I do know something to keep in mind when school does come back into session. People will be behind in doing meetings and things like that, so we ask to be patient. It may take a while to get evaluated as things change for kids. It looks like, oh yes, it says, yes, my child was classified, and your answer was perfect. So there you go, Gretchen.
Oh. Good, but please always feel free to call us if you need more information, because that's what we're here for.
Oh, this was actually very, very nice. Thank you for Mary. She said not a question. We have used Starbridge to help us advocate for our student, and I highly recommend families to utilize this service. So thank you very much, Mary. We appreciate that.
That was really nice.
Oh, wait, here's one more, and this is actually a really interesting question. So let me, I would love to bring my child back to district. How can I proceed if the district claims they don't have an appropriate placement in district?
I've worked with families with this issue, and it's something that may be a step each step along. It may not be a complete, they're back in the district suddenly. But again, it's again working with the school district and letting them know that you're very aware of IDEA and the regulations and what that has to say and what needs to be happening back in your child's district for them to come back, and then start developing a plan for that. So does that child need a behavioral specialist? I'm not sure what the issue is, why they're out of the district. Well, let's just say it's behaviors. So does your child, does the district need to be looking at a behavioral intervention specialist that could be a part of the child's program there? Would the child need to be in the regular classroom for a couple, for a class or two, and then in a self-contained classroom for some of the other ones? Again, you need to develop a plan with the school, letting them know that you want your child to come back to their home district, to not be in such a restrictive setting as being away from school so far.
Great, thank you. And please feel free to give us a call. We're still here. We are more than happy to have questions. Please be on the lookout. We are going to be doing more webinars for families and for professionals, so feel free to check out our website in the next few weeks and give us a call if you need anything. After this webinar tomorrow, you should get an email with a link to SurveyMonkey. Please just take a minute just to fill that out so we can show our funders we're still supporting families. And Gretchen, thank you so much. This has been great. Thank you for your time, and thank you everyone. Gretchen, did you want to finish it off?
No, I just would say thank you for being with us today, and I hope you will watch our calendar for more webinars coming up. And good luck at your annual reviews coming up if you haven't had one yet.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.